do appreciate John telling me to do that. So again, welcome everyone to our November speaker night. Mississauga Center RASC, we've got a special guest tonight, John Reed, who is an astronomer out in Halifax, an author and amazing public outreach supporter of astronomy and a great representative of our society. And tonight he's going to give us an introduction to various aspects of astronomy, which will be great for novice astronomers. And I'm going to ask our co-chair of our public outreach and programming committee, Swapna, to introduce him. Swapna, it's all yours.
It's a pleasure to have you here, John, with us today. Thank you very much. I personally have gained so much from you. Learning when I was doing my Explore the Universe and Explore the Moon certificate, I watched you and Jenna over the pandemic with all your great knowledge through those meetings. In fact, I had the pleasure of buying 2 of your books, 50 Things to See on the Telescope and 50 Things to See on the Moon. And they were my guides through the entire certification program. And I've been actually going back to the YouTube videos and taking a look. But what I would like to do also is, as part of today, just some logistics. I would just invite, this is an interactive session, unlike our other sessions where it's usually a speaker followed by a Q&A. What I would like to do is invite the audience to put in the questions in the chat. What I will do is, as we progress through the program today, I'll read those questions over to John. So we'll be doing a Q&A pretty much throughout this session. So I highly encourage the questions. If you have questions on telescopes and eyepieces and certificates and how John got into astronomy, all of that, and please ask your questions, because John is looking forward to answering them for us. I certainly have learned a lot from John through those multitude of Zoom sessions that we've done over the pandemic. With that, I would like to invite John to maybe introduce yourself, John, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Swapna, for inviting me here tonight. This is really fantastic, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. And great to meet everyone. This is going to be a great session. So I feel like I will forever be a beginner astronomer. I'll never, get too advanced, because I just love the basics. I love them so much. I love going out and seeing Saturn. Like, anytime it's up, I'll be out looking at Saturn. I'll be looking at Jupiter. I'll be observing the moon. I started into astrophotography, which I consider a completely different hobby from observational astronomy. But basically, even what I did with that, I do it as simple as I can. I don't use PixInsight. I basically just set it up so that the pictures show up on my iPad, and then I can show them. And then I do that so that if I'm out and doing outreach, and I'm using an astrophotography setup, I'll just hand the iPad to someone else, as we talked about in the introduction, and then they can do the outreach. And maybe if they don't know the next guy, I'll be like, type in M13, type in, M8, and then they can do that. But really, I love keeping it simple. I love staying in this world of sort of what you experience in that first year, that joy of being a beginner amateur astronomer. I'll just live in that. And it's been really neat for me, because I didn't discover astronomy really until 10 years ago. I didn't know that the hobby existed, and I didn't know about RASC, and I didn't know about the Astronomical League or astronomy clubs or any of that. And I went, and what really got me into it is I went to the pharmacy, and they had a telescope on sale for $13. Actually, $13 was the regular price. It wasn't on sale. And so I bought it, and I took it home, and I opened it up, and fortunately, Saturn was up that night.
Oh, wow.
I don't even think I knew it was Saturn. So I went outside my apartment. This is outside San Francisco, and the BART line was, running right by our apartment, because we live right beside, which is like an above ground subway, below ground when it goes to San Francisco. And so anyway, right above, there's the trains are going by, and there's street lights, but fortunately planets don't care about light pollution. And so I set up this little telescope, which I think it was like a 30, a 30 millimeter, 30 millimeters diameter, whatever, probably the F13 scope. And I saw Saturn, and it was clear. And the seeing must have just been perfect because it was clear and crisp. And I was like, whoa, if I can do this with a $13 telescope, just imagine what I could do with a telescope that costs 5 times as much. And anyway, so yeah, it's interesting though, or hilarious, that we got, when you go to the pharmacy in the States, like CVS, whatever, you get these coupons that are like, 3 feet long. Like, what? I just ordered a stick of gum. Why? What is with the thing? But you can super coupon. There's like all these coupons on your receipts after you buy something. And so my wife was like buying makeup, and you got like 75% off one item if you bought makeup. And anyway, so she gets 75% off, and then you could like add another 75% with another coupon, which you can do for some reason there. Anyway, so I went right to the telescope again, same one. I bought another one, and I think the total came to 58 cents. So anyway, and I gave that one away. So there's my first like 2 telescopes. Yeah. But anyway, so I went and got one on Craigslist, I think for like $60, and it was a Meade ETX 60, so it was a 60 millimeter, aperture. I don't have one here. So basically, like this much telescope was my second one, and that was the one where I saw M13 for the first time. M13. So now this is 2011. First one was around 2010, 2011, and then I get aperture fever. I'm like, oh my gosh! I realized that there's a relationship between the size of the aperture of your telescope and how much you can see. And then that Christmas, might have been the Christmas 2010, just to go work back in time here. Anyway, one of those Christmases, that's when I got the 12-inch Sony. I went right from the 60 millimeter sort of Mac thing to the big, the big kahunas there, the big Dom. And as soon as I got that, I researched like the astronomy club, and I walked in like, oh, you're new to astronomy? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but I've got a 12-inch Dob. And they're like, you've got a 12-inch Dob. You need to go join our outreach team. And I was like, yes. And so I joined the outreach team. And keep in mind, I have like the most boring job in the world. I work for the bleach company, Clorox in the States there, and, doing accounting, doing finance, listening to calls with Wall Street. It's the most boring thing I could possibly imagine, given my career now. But, yeah, so I got this big job, and then it was almost 4 nights a week. I was just going like school to school. I mean, you didn't have clouds. We were on the other side of the Caldecott Tunnel, if you know San Francisco at all. And that mountain there blocks the fog. The fog doesn't really come over. So we never had fog. It was almost always clear nights. And it was like 4 nights a week I was going to these outreach sessions, and every night would be like at a minimum 150 people. Like these were not small events, and they're mostly like high schools. They bring in all the high school students or junior highs, and stuff like that as part of their science programs. And anyways, but I realized that a lot of these kids had telescopes and they didn't know what to point them at. Like maybe they even had I don't know for sure, but like what books they had, but maybe they had night watch. But I found night watch pretty intimidating, even though I think Terence Dickinson is a fabulous astronomy writer. But I needed something even simpler, like for my brain that could only handle like, not that much information at one time. And so I put together this book that had 10 targets for every season, and 50 things to see with a telescope, and it became incredibly popular. Oops, dropping stuff all over the floor. And so this was my humble beginnings, was this astronomy book that I put together, and I put it up on like Lulu or something, one of these like weird, obscure self-publishing websites, and it sold like 3 copies on my desk. So, and then I realized that you could post directly, put books directly on Amazon, and then I sold 1,000. And I'm like, what? And then so I rewrote it. That was like the first Christmas, and then I was like, oh, this is insane. And, a couple of Christmases later, it was big enough that I realized I could quit my job with the earnings from this random telescope book. And ended up,
Incredible.
yeah, so it was my evil plan to get back to Halifax because I love Canada and I've been in the States for too long. And this was 2016, and we put our house up for sale, and I said, well, and I applied to NASA to work as a budget analyst, and I applied to St. Mary's to their astrophysics program. And I said, well, if we sell the house, I'll move to Washington, D.C. and take a job as a budget analyst for NASA. But if we don't sell the house, on the book earnings, we can move to Canada because then there's no health insurance to pay for, which in the States would have been about $25,000 a year, being unemployed. Because if you're employed and stable, not that big of an issue. But if you're switching jobs and stuff, you want to make sure you can afford that 25 grand a year. So I had 2 kids at the time. I now have 3 kids, so it would be even worse. But anyway, the house didn't sell. You can cut me off at any time. This is getting way long-winded. But the house didn't sell, so we moved to Halifax. I started I was 33 years old. I started again as an undergraduate astrophysics student at St. Mary's University. A couple months in, a couple semesters in, I started working at Burke-Gaffney Observatory, which was great. So a couple nights a week, I'd be up there with the Astronomy 1000 students, which are the kids taking stars and planets. So they're non-scientists or non-science track students. So we were right back into as if, not that much of a difference between first year university and high school. So it was a total throwback to my days volunteering with the Mount Diablo Astronomical Society in California. And yeah, so then I wrote my second astronomy book, which was 50 Things to See with a Telescope Kids. And this one is now the most popular astronomy book, not just stargazing, astronomy book on Amazon. And so it's been really neat to sort of use this as a springboard. This was self-published. All this is literally just Microsoft Word. I get very good at formatting in Microsoft Word at the time. But I pitched this to a mainstream publisher, and they picked me up as an author. And that's when I got to, producing the ones that you see in bookstores. There's things to see with a telescope, Stargazer's Guide, things to see on the moon, things to know about the space station, and those books. It was neat and my wife wrote a book too. We were brainstorming what doesn't exist yet. And it was 50 animals that have been to space, because we knew about, the dogs and we heard about a cat, and we're like, well, how many more animals? And so we wrote this book, mainly my wife, 50 animals that have been to space. And I had a 3-hour call with Dr. Cyan Proctor today. So you might know Dr. Cyan Proctor because of, I don't know, the last issue of Time magazine, she was on the cover. And then the issue before that, she was on the cover again. So this is Cyan. So I had a 3-hour So I had a 3-hour call with her today because I'm working on a book for her. She reached out to me for help on a book because I knew her before she was an astronaut from a Mars happy hour, Zoom happy hour.
A Mars happy hour, John?
Yeah, the Mars Humans to Mars organization out of Washington, D.C. So they had a Tuesday night happy hour and I met her there. But anyway, so she went to space last month as part of Inspiration 4, and she's releasing a book about the art of inspiration. And anyway, so today she was saying how she took this animal book and she bought a bunch of copies and gave it to all the people on her team and her crew. And I thought that was insane that all these people that we just saw on on Netflix and everything are walking around or having their homes as book about 50 animals that have been to space. Because they've got a brand that they're working on called Muttniks, which is these cartoon characters. It's one of the projects that she's working on. Anyway, yeah. So that's awesome. That's a very random tangent about my backstory and how I got excited in astronomy and how I get to do what I do. So I've since published 14 books about space. 2 of those aren't astronomy, they're science fiction. So These are cool. I would recommend getting audiobooks of them because the voice actors did a great job. Um, and that is, I think that's the way to listen to those. But anyway, yeah, so 14 books. Cut me off. I know I've been going crazy. Yes.
Oh, that's okay. No, that's fascinating. I do see a whole bunch of telescopes behind you. And, you know, one of the questions that's coming in is, what telescope would you recommend for stargazing for $1,000 for a novice astronomer? So 1,000 or under. And so, you know, and I'm curious, you mentioned earlier you got a few telescopes behind you. So which ones, like, if you could walk us through, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I can go. Christmas is coming, so if you've got $1,000 budget for telescope, that's generally higher than. I feel like most people are buying telescopes for their kids, and they have these impossibly low budgets, and it's like, oh, it's gonna be tough. No, but $1,000 is great in that you have a lot of options. So a lot of it depends on what you want to do. Like, are you more interested in planets or deep sky? What's important to you about the telescope? Like, a lot of people really like refractors. Like this white one back here, it's just a beautiful instrument, absolutely gorgeous telescope. But it's not as powerful as a Dobsonian, right? For the same amount of money, you could get almost you could definitely get a 12-inch Dobsonian, you know, which is an order of magnitude more light gathering than a 4-inch refractor. Yeah, so what could you get for $1,000? If you like light buckets, you know, get as big a Dobsonian as you can. Dobsonian style, those are the ones on the Lazy Susan. The interesting thing, people don't like Dobsonians because of their size. They're very difficult to maneuver around, but in terms of space in your house, like that telescope is just a regular refractor, and it's huge. Like this takes up like at least 15 square feet of floor space. So if you're leaving a telescope out, and if you want to stargaze, like the best telescope is the one you use the most. So it's good to keep one assembled. But a Dobsonian, my 12-inch Dobsonian takes up a lot less room than this refractor.
And is that because of the tripod space that it's taking up? That's why the white one
exactly.
at the back?
Well, plus it's long too. I mean, it's a meter and a half long because it's a meter focal length plus all the dew shield and whatnot. But then there's also the Schmidt Cassegrain, which is like a C8 here, and the C8, one of my favorite scopes to recommend, even though I haven't used one in a while, and I don't own one, is like a Nexstar Evolution. Like if you're into tech, you're into a well-rounded telescope, and I think they do one in a 6-inch. I know there's a 6-inch on a Nexstar, but so the Evolution is a go-to mount that has a Schmidt Cassegrain telescope on it, and you drive it around with your iPad if you're into that. It's also Hyperstar compatible, so if you ever wanted to move that scope on and start astrophotography, the adapter costs about as much as the whole telescope, but it is a possibility that you can go right into an astrophotography system at f2. Anyone, you know, that's really fast. So you get your images without a lot of wait. You collect data very quickly at f2.
For the newbies in the audience, what's a f2? That would be a good introduction into the fast telescopes.
Sure.
What does the F stand for? Yeah.
Its focal ratio is f2. So this is like a little mini Dobsonian at f4. So focal ratio is the aperture divided by the focal length. And if a telescope is fast, it's going to put a lot of photons onto your sensor in a lot of photons per pixel, and you collect data very fast. So the lower the focal ratio, the more, I guess, photons per pixel you're gathering. Someone can correct me if I'm saying it backwards. Sometimes I say it backwards, especially when you're up at 5 in the morning with a baby. Anyway, yeah. So the lower the focal ratio, the faster the telescope, and the easier it is to do astrophotography. So like these telescopes without these adapters are like f10. So if you just put a camera on the back, it's very challenging to do astrophotography. You have way too much magnification. Like if you were taking a picture of Andromeda, you would just get the central core. for example. If you want a picture of Andromeda, you need as small a telescope as possible, like a little sharp star back there. Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
the ETU, I know that for the Explore the Universe certificate, right? It looks like you can't use the go-to. That's one of the recommendations, right? So, for $1,000, a Newtonian, maybe if somebody doesn't want a DOP, what would you recommend there?
I don't know. I'm always mixed about Newtonians. All my Newtonians always need collimation. I mean, I love the DOB, and the DOB is technically Newtonian. But a Newtonian, I have a big 8-inch carbon fiber thing that, you know, but it always needs collimation. I'm like, well, I might as well just get a refractor, you know, and just it's maybe smaller aperture, but at least it's less of a pain. Yeah, a really neat versatile one is putting a small telescope. Like, so this is my travel scope. It's a C90, and if you take this telescope, which is about $200, and maybe $200 US, and you put it on this mount, which is an AZ GTI, and it's under 500. So if you combine those two together and then get some nice eyepieces, I take that setup everywhere because it fits. I can fit the telescope and the mount and a computer and a camera in a backpack. And
who makes the AZ GTI?
The Skywatcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
when I was in the market, I also was interested between, you know, Celestron and Skywatcher, right? You kind of go back and forth between the two. Just interested in your recommendations for somebody just starting out.
Gosh, most of my scopes are Explore Scientific, really. Yeah, they make, if you have a fairly modest budget, they make a small version of this big white one. And it's just 102 millimeter Explore First Light, and it's on what's called a Twilight Nano mount. Someone's asking, do you find the AZ GTI accurate or inaccurate using GoTo? I could tell you I use it for astrophotography, and it is more accurate than my EQ6R Pro. I get 0.5 arc second guiding on it. But yeah, I don't know if other people are having a different experience with that. Just answering Rob's question.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I find it accurate.
Yeah, so I think the follow-up he's asking is, he finds the guiding is okay as a go-to, but the go-to doesn't work well. Is that your experience too, John?
It's worked well for me. Yeah. So
yeah.
But I don't know. So I don't. A lot of the time, even when I use GoTo, I usually have I'm really bad at setting. I always rush the alignment process because I'll rely on my knowledge of the sky to be able to find it with the finder. I use like either a red dot or a telrad. So a lot of the times I'll just set the telescope up quickly, do a very rough polar align. And I'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about this one. And then because I know where the targets are in the sky, I'll even do a 2-star align if we know GoTo scopes. And I'll just say, yeah, that's the star, even though the scope's not pointed there. Just because then I'm just in a hurry to get to whatever I'm doing. But I guess if you really want to do like a large number of deep sky objects in one night and you want it to be very precise, then yeah, you want to do a really good 2-star align and then you can add calibration stars depending on your GoTo system. I think we're getting a little off topic here, but yeah, if I'm trying to be really accurate, I'll do a nice 2-star align, add calibration stars. And you can also, if your scope is out of alignment or you find it's not on target, just center your next target. And then you can usually add that target to the telescope's alignment algorithm. And that helps as well. Yeah,
sounds good.
Anyway,
how about eyepieces though too? So how about eyepieces as well? Because as beginners, we're always wondering about which eyepiece to get. I've got a certain budget. Where do I start?
Yeah. So usually telescopes come with eyepieces that aren't so great. Give you some examples here. Like this one just says wide angle. I don't know if it's usually the ones a good beginner eyepiece will say Plossel on it, and they're usually about $40 to $60. But yeah, so a lot of people do want to upgrade from these 25 millimeter ones that come with it. And so the difference is this looks like it's about 2 pieces of glass, a Plossel eyepiece. So you'll see it PL, some other letters, I forget the order. Anyway, yeah. And so they're like a 4-element eyepiece, and they give you a fairly wide field of view, at least 50 degrees, which, and they're really great. So just look for that word, Plossel. Should have one in one of the scopes here, but anyway. And so basically, if you're on a low budget, that's, if you have hundreds of dollars for eyepieces, then people get TelViews and all sorts of fancy stuff. Just go on Sky and Telescope, and they'll definitely, there's lots of options. For beginners, there's some fun eyepieces. Like if I'm observing the moon, there's a zoom eyepiece that you twist. And so if you're looking for that, here it is right here. These are really fun. And I love this for the moon, especially when I did explore the moon, because you would just twist to zoom in.
Is that the Celestron 8 to 24 mm zoom lens?
The quality the viewing quality isn't the same as like a nicer eyepiece, that's for sure. Like I notice it causes some aberration, but the fun factor is there with this, so you're sacrificing quality for fun,
So what I'm hearing is a super Palossal is good. Like any recommendation on brands, or you're not allowed to do that?
Do that. I think I have both Celestron and Need ones kicking around. I forget which one. I mean, you can just go. Oh, and the size. I almost always use the 25 millimeter, and then if I want to get magnification, I'll use Barlow. But for me, I'm usually always under 100 times magnification. So you calculate magnification by taking the focal length of your telescope and dividing it by the focal length written on the eyepiece. So that's a good rule of thumb. I usually, every time I do a video, so I run the Learn to Stargaze YouTube channel, which I'm trying very hard to make it stand out. But in almost every video, I'll point out, that's how you calculate your magnification, and then also the maximum magnification. And the maximum magnification is just a rule of thumb, but you basically take the diameter or your telescope's aperture and multiply by 2. So this is a C90, so 90 times 2 would be 180. So 180 times would be the maximum amount of magnification you'd want to put on a scope like this.
There's a question about how about reducers? There's a question there.
Yeah, so basically reducers, you could take an F10, for example, and make it an F8. And again, what a reducer does is it just widens your field of view, makes your telescope faster. I don't own any for visual. I use reducers, field flatteners for astrophotography because you basically have, it's a corrector that flattens your image out so you don't get out of focus stars on the edges of your images for the most part, but it also widens the field of view so you can fit like the whole Andromeda galaxy in. But again, for me, I use those for astrophotography, which again, to me, is a different hobby than, visual astronomy.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the certificate. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah. Let's fly through. We're about 35 minutes in here, so let's fly through the certificates. I could share my screen if you want to talk about those.
Yes, thank you.
Make sure I have that open. Yeah, so if anyone doesn't know, RASC offers observing certificates, and I'm going to talk about the 3 observing certificates here that I think are targeted at beginners. And so basically, to get you started, you just go onto the Royal Astronomical Society website, and you'll find pretty quickly these observing programs right here. And the beginner ones, the 3 that I consider a beginner are Explore the Universe, and that's one you can do just with binoculars, and some of the targets you don't even need binoculars. And basically, here's the requirements. So you need to identify 12 constellations, and I believe in your notes, they really want you to have identified the brightest star or one of the stars in the constellation. The moon and 16 features on the moon. 5 planets in the solar system, basically Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And again, you can use binoculars, so it's not like you need to see the rings of Saturn to get the certificate. You just need to record how you saw it. And the Earth does not count. I texted Dave Chapman, and he said no. Dave is sort of considers himself sort of the father of exploring the universe, and so he said no, he can't count the Earth, even though it's a planet. Some deep sky, 12 deep sky objects, and 10 double stars, and then you get your certificate. So again, this can just be done with binoculars. And the way
are these all, John, are all these 55 targets all done in one? Do you think they can all be done in one season, or is it over multiple seasons?
It's over multiple seasons, but if you were really ambitious, you could stay up all night, because every 6 hours you get sort of like a different seasons. You can divide the sky into 4 seasons when you look south, because we live in the northern hemisphere. And sort of every 6 months you get a completely new sky in the evening. And but if you stay up after midnight, the sky turns over as well in the south there. So but the way that when Jenna and I were doing the Explore the Universe, the show, before we did that, I was already working on a guidebook, which was an activity workbook, 50 Things to See with a Telescope activity workbook. And I designed this so that as you go through, if you only do even almost a fraction of the activities in the book, and I have a tracker in the back, which is basically the list that's on the screen there, and you just tick off how many you've done, you'll get the certificate really, really quick, just by working through this workbook. And basically, so if you're doing the constellations, I had a little section here. The workbook is trace the constellations. So it shows you the stars without all the lines filled in. And then so if you're out under the sky, you would fill in the whole constellation. I also have a picture of it here. And you would check off with a check mark the stars in that constellation to show that you found them. And so it's just a really quick way to sort of fly through the Explore the Universe certificate. And then you can use this book as your application. So like take your cell phone, take a bunch of pictures, convert them to PDF, and then email them in per the instructions.
And there's a logbook on the website too that people want to maybe just print off at their printer too, right? On the website, that the RASC.
So you can use either or both. I know Lisa Fanning, I think she just used this, which is totally fine. Just to check off that you've seen those 55 objects or more. I think most people naturally just have more. But yeah, so that's Explore the Universe. So that's definitely a really cool beginner program. You can use RASC's record keeping as well. It was fun. So, and the videos, watch the video of how to do it. There was one that with me in it, and filmed by Haley Helmich. And directed by Dave Chapman there. And then, so here you can, if you're there, you can click on these logbook pages, which will give you stuff you can fill in as well. And these logs are for even more advanced programs too. Like to get Explore the Universe, you wouldn't have to have filled in everything here.
So John, I'll jump in and ask a question here for those, some of these, and so I know we'll get to the other certificates. They ask for sketching as well. For you to sketch out what you're seeing, and I am not a good sketcher. What might be some tips for people who are not good sketchers?
Well, it's not an official requirement. That's a nice, sketching is a nice to have. And so so if we look at, here's my submission for the moon. Should I do that one? Yeah. So here is my Explore the Moon certificate submission, and you can see that I sketched it, but it wasn't that much of an issue that the quality of my sketch wasn't really up to par. These are pretty mellow.
Those are fantastic.
Sketches.
Yeah, they're better than mine for sure.
But it's actually it's not a official requirement. It's just a nice to have. And sketching is a really great way to appreciate the night sky and build your appreciation for the night sky as a beginner observer. Definitely helps. Okay, so moving on. So that is Explore the Universe, and the next program that you might want to do is Explore the Moon. And so this is, again, you get to this workbook here from the Explore the Moon page. There's a little video of me explaining how to do it. And so the way I did this is I basically just printed off this guide here for Explore the Moon. And in this one, you have to see all the targets. I think it's 110 targets. Except there's a telescope version, and then there's a binocular version too, which has slightly less targets. But I'll speak to the binocular version here. And basically, you have this image of all the targets here, and you want to start on the first phase of the lunar cycle, where you can only see, you can see my mouse, right? Where on sort of day 2 or 3 days after the new moon, these craters along this limb will come into view. And then the next day, these craters here will come into view. And so you basically work across the surface of the moon. And I was lucky, I had almost 9 days in a row of clear skies. And then you go down here, and you check them off as you go down to make sure you've got them all. And then that's sort of your inventory of have you got them. And then over here in your notepad, where is it here? Yeah. This is just a more detailed way to keep track of what you saw. So you put in the date and time and what telescope you were using, and then any notes on what you saw. So, and that's how you got to Explore the Moon. You can't miss, you have to get all the targets to get the certificate. Whereas Explore the Universe gives you a larger list, and then you just have to get a certain number.
What was the biggest challenge for you for Explore the Moon? And I'll ask the question, a follow-up question. What was the most interesting feature that you saw on the moon too?
So the biggest challenge for me was that some of the craters were a little washed out, and I challenged myself. I used this sort of $100 telescope to do it. So this is probably the most challenging telescope I have to use. One of these, low budget equatorial ones. But basically I got it up to about 100 magnification using a Barlow. And then you turn the right ascension knob to keep the moon in frame. And so it actually worked out really nice. So I would say the challenge was, I guess, getting used to using a manual low budget equatorial mount that broke a couple times in the process. But at the end of the day, it was very fulfilling to be able to use sort of a very minimalist, low budget approach to do the whole program. So I did, yeah. So that was the scope I did for that. What were the coolest things? I don't know. I love everything about the moon. It's just so beautiful because when you're using a telescope to explore the moon, it's almost like you're in a spaceship flying over it, especially when you see it slowly drift across your field of view. Yeah, one of my favorite objects on the moon. I love the dumbbell craters. They're pretty cool. I nicknamed everything because I can't remember all these Latin. So I've got nicknames for a lot of the stuff. I like the Cobra Head, which I think is Schroner's Valley. That's on the western limb. And yeah, let me just go up to the map. No, that's the, so they give you two views. One's mirror reverse because most refractors, unless there's what's called an erecting eyepiece, they give you a mirror image of the moon. So yeah, you have to be aware which the map you're using matches your telescope.
And does the certification give us the map for to help us out which view you're looking at?
Yeah, so this is the workbook for the certificate here. And so yeah, they give you, this is the regular, and then this would be your mirror reverse view here. Yeah.
When I was doing this, one of the biggest challenges for me, and I don't know if you found that, was always finding the just 2 or 3 days after the new moon, trying to find craters, your gang of four, because it comes up quite early in the evening and sets pretty early, and especially if you're trying to do it in the summertime, bit of a challenge there.
Yeah, I did. So for anyone who doesn't know, the ecliptic, like the line that where the moon and planets go across the sky is higher in the winter when you're because at nighttime it's higher because you're tilted away from the sun. So that means that the plane of the solar system is higher by the night. And so, yeah, anyway, some astrophysics there. Yeah, so that's
there's a
exploring.
question.
And then,
sorry, John, there's a question here. Maybe I'll just ask this now. I'm looking for a scope and mount. So when I look at the planets with software, sorry, I'll read it again. Back to basics. I'm looking for a scope and mount so I can look at our planets with software that will assist in finding the planets for me. What would you suggest?
yeah, I mean, if you're into planets, I like looking at planets in the SCT telescopes, or a MAC. So that's like the C8, for example, is an SCT telescope, Schmidt Cassegrain, or like even this little Mighty Mac. That's the nickname. It's a C90. These are really great for planets, but also, and I need to do more testing because I literally just got this telescope. They're really long tube refractors. Apparently are pretty good for planets too. I need to do more testing on this big honking thing over here, which came broken in more ways than I could count out of the box. So you'll see a YouTube video on that in about a week. So this is about $1,000 telescope, and it ended up costing me only about $100 because of all the stuff that's been wrong with it, and the company gave me a refund. Anyway, yeah. Follow Learn to Stargaze on YouTube, and you'll see that the adventure of this telescope. It was kind of neat because I was doing this unboxing and I opened it up and it was broken in all these places.
Oh,
and
no,
I immediately
so
I wrote Scott, the president of Explore Scientific, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing an unboxing video for YouTube, and the telescope came out broken. And he immediately sent me his cell phone number. He's like, call me immediately. And so the YouTube video will have me on a Zoom call with the president of Explore Scientific. It'll be a good one. So definitely follow Learn to Stargaze on YouTube for all my crazy adventures. But yeah, so talking about the moon, this was a book that I wrote with Dave Chapman, who's a big, loves the Explore the Moon program, helped develop it. But in this one, it's probably more difficult to get your certificate with 50 things to see on the moon, because the Explore the Moon book has 100. Although I believe all the targets are in here. But basically, what I did here is I have a binocular view, a Newtonian view, and a refractor view, because the Newtonian rotates your image 180 degrees, and the refractor telescopes provide a mirror image. So when you're looking for your targets, I really found it important to show all three views on every page. So that was the beauty of this book. And this book got picked up by Celestron, and they actually packaged it with every one of their beginner telescopes for the Apollo 50 celebrations. So anyone that got a telescope from Celestron, at least one of their like sub $200 ones, would have a copy of this book already.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, from in 2019. So you want to move on real quick to Messier objects. My Zoom, the Zoom instructions are in the way here, so I gotta move them down here. Yeah. And now the Messier program. So in the Messier program, anyone doesn't know what the Messier objects are. They were a list of objects that are not comets. So a list developed by French astronomer Charles Messier in the 18th century and published in Conseil de Temps magazine as a list of, you found this fuzzy thing in the sky, it's not a comet. But then as telescopes grew and got bigger, we realized that they were actually the most interesting things in the night sky: galaxies, nebulas, open clusters, planetary nebula, small asterisms, that sort of thing. And so the list contains 110 objects now. It used to be 103. Some astronomers like Helen Sawyer Hogue went through and they rounded up to 110 over the years. So for the RASC Messier certificate, you have to observe all of them. So this is quite a challenge. If you're in the United States and you're a member of the Astronomical League, they only make you observe 70. So bigger challenge for Canadians. And so it was this list that inspired me to write 110 things to see with a telescope, which was co-written by Chris Vaughn, who is also on the call here. And then so this RASC program can be done entirely using this book, and you can document your progress. I've got the observing log on every page, so you can sketch it here, write the date, time, location, sky conditions, what telescope you're using, what eyepieces, and then take all your notes as well. And there's, you know, if you run out of space, there's generally enough white space on the page that you could also, you know, put in your star maps. Is someone drawing on my screen? Someone's drawing. Can you see those white lines?
Yeah,
yellow
I'm
lines?
not sure. Yeah.
That's really weird. So someone named Jill is drawing on my screen. Okay.
I don't know how that's happening, but wow.
It's like someone's using a pointing control. Yeah, that's weird. Whoever Jill is.
Okay.
All right.
Must be COVID.
That's weird. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So that's 110 things to see with a telescope. Definitely check this out. If you haven't done the Messier list yet and wanted to start, this is organized by season. So basically, if you had a clear night, you could hypothetically knock off all of autumn right now. You could even do some of summer because the summer triangle is still up. And then stay up after midnight and catch a winter target. So, and then you're halfway done to your Messier certificate. Although you're not supposed to rush it. You're supposed to take your time and appreciate every target when you do this list. Not rushing is actually a requirement as well for this, if you really read the fine print. So in this one, they really do appreciate that a sketch of your target, and yeah. Oh, there are the lines. The lines disappeared.
So I was curious, if most of us live in the light polluted areas, when we look at these RAS certifications, Moon's the easiest one, I think. But what about the Explore the Universe and the Messier? Do you need to get out into a darker sky, or like what might be some tips for our for folks who want to pursue these certificates?
Yeah. So for Explore the Universe, I'd say 99% of it can be done from the city, but it definitely really helps to get out. And the reason is, if you're in the city, especially if you're in somewhere really bright like Toronto, some of the constellations, like you can't even see the stars in the Little Dipper, for example. They're just too dim from downtown. And so if you're trying to collect your constellations, even a few minutes outside the city will really help get those other stars to show up. And then deep sky objects too. Like if you're looking for the Andromeda Galaxy in binoculars, it's going to be a whole lot easier if you're at least a few minutes outside town. Like you don't need dark skies to get it, but I feel like suburbs would help. And other people with, I could do it from my backyard here in Halifax, but Halifax is not Toronto. So I don't have experience in like even when I was in California, we were far enough that I could probably do even most of the Messier certificate from my house, just because of getting away.
And are binoculars also an option for folks who don't have a telescope or don't want one? What are the certificates that folks could do if they just have a pair of binoculars with them?
Yeah, so you can do Explore the Universe. You can definitely do with binoculars. It's designed to be done with binoculars at most. And I mean, people claim to be able to do Messier with binoculars. I think it'd be challenging. There's a lot of small globular clusters there. And then Explore the Moon has a binocular version, but you really want to get up to about 100 magnification to really complete Explore the Moon telescope version. So you're not going to be able to do that with binoculars. And then if you do the binocular program, you're not supposed to transfer your sort of credits over to the telescope program if you do move up and do the telescope one. But there is a binocular version for that program as well.
Oh, okay, cool. And then what about the brightness of the moon? What would you recommend in order to see the features? Because especially if you're looking at, a moon that is getting to close to a full moon as the days leading up to it. So from a visual perspective, what might be some of the tips for those folks?
So if you're viewing deep sky, so the moon only affects deep sky objects like galaxies and nebulas and star clusters, right? So you can definitely go, if there's a full moon or a bright moon, you can do double stars, you can do your planets, you can do a lot of the constellations. Like if the moon is in a certain constellation and it's near full, yeah, it's going to block out a lot of those stars. But there's a lot you can do during a full moon. But I wouldn't go doing the Messier list on a full moon night. That might be a little bit of a waste of your time. But yeah, because you're also going to get, you want as much signal to noise, I guess is the official term. For like if the sky is bright, then the deep sky objects are just not going to pop out against that background. And the moon really brightens up the sky. And so to get the best experience, you want that moon to be gone. And again, the further out of town you get, the better. And there's websites for that. So like darkskyfinder.net, I think, or .info. If you look up Dark Sky Finder on Google, there'll be a map and it's color coordinated. And you can see the darkness of the skies where you live and sort of pick a park that's at least in maybe a blue zone. And that would be where you could go to really snag all those Messier objects. And again, for the Messier certificate, you need a telescope. So.
Right. And what would be and if you're doing Explore the Moon, would you recommend like a moon filter, or people who are using binoculars to use a pair of sunglasses or something?
Yeah, that helps you. I don't know. I'm pretty lazy in that regard, and I just observe the moon, and then when you look up with your telescope, you like see this giant white spot in your field of view. But I just put up with that. Yeah, I mean, so the moon filters they're usually polarized, and so what polarization does is it really reduces the glare from reflected light, and so it really increases the contrast on the surface of the moon, what you're seeing. I usually just forget mine at the bottom of the drawer and just observe without it, and it doesn't seem to bother me that much. But yeah, if you've got the moon filter, definitely throw it on there. It helps. So.
What about apps? Sorry, John. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Yeah, I can talk about apps. I pretty much just use Stellarium because I like stargazing from my books, really. Like I use my own stargazing books to come up with lists of targets. So I haven't dove too deep into Sky Safari or any of those apps. But also, like if you're observing at night, you don't want to be looking at your phone. I mean, I know some people cover their phone in red cellophane, and then that helps. But you want to use a red flashlight. I use a red headlamp that turns white if you don't click it right. But yeah, and then so I'll usually read my logbooks. Like I'll hold it, and then for cleaning up at night, I'll put it on my head. But yeah, so I use Stellarium because it's free and easier than Sky Safari. But I'll just use that for like, hey, what time is Saturn going to be up, or what time does the moon rise or set, or that very basic stuff. Otherwise, if I'm coming up with a list of targets, like what do I want to see tonight? Like that's a book. That's a book that's organized by season. And for star hopping, that's what I'll use.
So planispheres are also very popular too. Would you be able to walk us through use of a planisphere and if that's useful in the certifications?
Yeah, it could be. So there's a really great video. You don't need me to walk you through that. I have them, not within reach, but if you go to the RASC, I'm not streaming. Anyway, the RASC website on the Explore the Universe, the video before the one that explains the one of how to do it is the Planosphere video. Yeah.
Oh, so that's on the RASC website?
Yeah, basically the Planosphere is you put the date and you line up the date and you line up the time together, and then you go out and you orient it, north to north, and you hold it up. So they're pretty straightforward. But there's a good video on the RASC website on the Messier certificate. Not the Messier, the Explore the Universe page has the instructions on how to use a planosphere right there. Yeah.
Star charts is something else I've seen folks use as well. What would you? What are your thoughts on that, on star charts?
Well, I mean, I have a bunch of star atlases, but for me, the way that I like to look at targets, that's why I did. When I wrote the books, I made I made my own star chart for every target, and that's because I get like overwhelmed with like 1,000 stars on one page. So like when I did the star charts for my book, it's just the target, the one target you're looking for, and the constellation that helps you sort of star hop over to it. And then
so that's right in your book for us to look at. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So every page has a customized star map that I made using Stellarium, that I hid, and anything that doesn't help you find your target, I hid it. And so that's what I use to find targets, are these maps that I made. And I make them for any target that I'm looking for and put them all in the books. So yeah. And so that's how I find things. So definitely if you're looking for things to see in space and you don't want to run out of cool things to see, I think this is the book, 110 Things to See with a Telescope. You've got an average of 25 to 30 things per season, targets to see, and and you revisit them over and over. So and you get a certificate if you see them all. Can't fail.
That's awesome. Yeah, between you and me, it's on my Christmas list to get that book that you were just showing. And so
you want me to go over types of telescopes that you might already have, because we wanted to tackle that tonight.
So and I just noticed too, Chris Vaughn is, I think, on the call too. So thank you, Chris, for joining us. And he's the co-author with you on that book too.
He is, yeah. So I've only been observing for 10 years, and in the middle of that, I was doing my astrophysics degree, and so you don't get to do, besides running the telescope with kids or with students, you don't really get to be in your backyard as much as you like. And so I wanted someone that had a lot more experience with the Messier list than I did, to help me write the book. Yeah. And so Chris met that requirement. Chris is awesome. And so he was a superstar there for the book together. Hey, Chris.
Hey. Yeah, I had recently finished the Messier certificate not too long before you asked me. So it was a great timing.
Yep.
Good to see you, Chris.
Likewise.
Great to see you, Chris. So Swapna, can we go through some of these scopes, and just because a lot of people might have the scope already and need to know how to use it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Now, these aren't recommendations. These are for ones that if you have it or if you've been gifted it, here's how to use it. So definitely a popular one this year is going to be these StarSense Explorer scopes, except these are on these ones. These have these push rods here. I forget what they call them. But to me, this is a red flag or a telescope to avoid, because they tend to be really sloppy. You get the telescope to where you think your target is, and it sort of slops down or slops to the side. But the key thing about these telescopes is you want to adjust the tension in such a way that it moves left and right and up and down without too much difficulty. And then this little knob here is your fine adjustment knob. So this moves the telescope ever so slowly left and right and up and down. So again, if not a telescope, I would recommend one with this little rod. But if you have one, that's how you use it. Just adjust the tension so that it's free to move, and then you've got a little slow motion control here. And you can use this somewhat to track objects across the sky. It doesn't work if you point it straight south, because then objects are sort of moving left to right. But if you're looking to the west, where objects are going down, or looking to the east when they're coming up, that's when this really, really helps. And the other cool thing about this is it's got what's called StarSense. And this is a really neat system that they've got. And what you do is you put your phone in here, and it uses your phone's camera, and it's got a little mirror here, and your phone analyzes the night sky and knows exactly where the telescope's pointed. And for me, it's worked almost flawlessly. And then you might click on Mars, and it gives you a big arrow, and you just steer the telescope over to Mars, which is really neat. So they've got a couple higher quality telescopes, like the 130 AZ model that has this StarSense system, which might be a really neat option. It's a lot of fun. The only downside, again, is you're looking at a phone, which is not necessarily something you want to be doing if you're looking for deep sky objects. But it does have a night vision mode where it makes the screen dark, and the accuracy has been really neat. And even if you pick your telescope up and move it to the other side of the lawn to avoid a tree, for example, which I have lots of them in our yard, it learns right away where it is in the sky. It's like scary how well it works. Anyway, that's StarSense.
Awesome.
So that's this. This is a Newtonian style telescope. The other downside of this particular model is it's got what's called a Burge-Jones lens in the focuser assembly. So the focal ratio of this is actually 1,000 millimeters. And so this is an f9 telescope. So anyway, it's not that, it makes it more difficult to find things in the sky because the field of view is quite narrow. And that also makes objects appear, for a given eyepiece, they can appear dimmer. And I looked at some targets that I should have been able to see from Halifax, and I just wasn't able to with this scope, whether it's just the quality of the glass. I don't know. I was not overly impressed. But anyway, that's that. Another type of scope that's really popular is this is a Celestron Astromaster. Usually there's a 90-degree diagonal here. But the way these work is it's called a panhandle mount. And so you use this to push the telescope around, but when you want to lock it in place, you twist it clockwise. And so that's the trick there for using this mount. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but again, you don't have any slow motion control at all. So oftentimes you'll get to the object and you'll let go, and the telescope will flick up a bit or flick to one side, and you're like, no, just stay on the target. And then objects move across the sky, and there's no mechanism to track them, right?
Right.
So you have to adjust it again every 30 seconds, and you might, they're not quite solid enough to do the job.
That's what I found with the moon, because the moon, we know the mechanics of the moon and the earth and so on, but from a telescope standpoint, it's like, could you stop for a second, moon?
Exactly. But
you
that's
have to
why
constantly
you have
adjust the telescope. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why you have telescopes with these slow motion controls. And so there are a few models in the sort of $200 range. Like there's a 100 millimeter Meade refractor that has these as well. And these are really nice to be able to move the telescope, with a very fine motion. And so this is this telescope that I picked up last week used, and when it came out of the box, you can see the cradle here is broken. It was missing the diagonal. It was missing the spacers to get the right back focus. It was missing these bolts to hold the finder scope in place. Yeah. Anyway, so but I haven't tested this. I haven't even given this telescope first light. I'm really excited. Hopefully we'll do that and we'll finish up the YouTube video. But yeah, so this is a basic alt-azimuth mount that you might find. And so basically you can loosen it so that you can sort of push it towards your target, using the finder, and then use these slow motion controls to offset, to track objects across the sky, and then sort of fine tune it as you look for your target. So I absolutely love this design and this way of sort of following objects across the sky. And again, you might see AZ in the name of the telescope, and that just means that the mount allows it to go up and down and left and right. So.
And And so for somebody who's starting off, would an alt-AZ or alt azimuth be something that they would start off with, or would you start off with an EQ, an equatorial mount?
So I would definitely start off with an alt-az, whether it's a Dobsonian. I mean, the most basic advice for a beginner observer is get the biggest Dobsonian you can handle, or biggest Dobsonian you can afford. That's general advice that you would give someone looking through a telescope for a telescope. You know, then you get into some more specifics, like if they know they like refractors like this or whatnot. But general advice is, yeah, these, like my son absolutely loves this little Dobsonian because it's, you know, as a 7-year-old, it's effortless to just, you know, you see the moon, you point it at the moon. Like there's not much more to it. I mean, the most important, and you can do this with any telescope when you set it up, is to make sure the finder is aligned to the telescope, and you can do it during the day on a distant chimney. But after that's done, a Dobsonian is pretty much, as long as you know how to focus it, that's all there is to it.
I like the size of it. It looks like it can be just set on a tabletop too. So you don't need, from a real estate perspective, if you're living in a condo or you have a room, a small area to store your telescope, looks like that might be a good size for limited real estate in your home.
Yeah, it is. I need to test this though to see if it optically outperforms the refractor, the small refractor there too. So it'll be interesting because it should, on paper, you know, this is 4 inches of aperture. So this telescope and this telescope have the same aperture. So hypothetically, the resolution of the image should be identical. But it seems like people aren't getting as good quality as they could with this for a number of reasons, which could be mirror quality, mirror coatings. The secondary mirror is obstructing the light path. Yeah. So anyway. But my son loves it, and Dobsonians are great. And yeah. But so now we can move on to the EQ mount if we want to talk about that. Because that's definitely by far the most challenging scope. I find the EQ mounts more challenging than like the Burke-Gaffney Observatory, you know, which is basically $1 million setup. Okay. All right. So I mean, millions of these are going to be sold to people around the world in the next 3 weeks. And it's a little sad because I feel like this is the type of telescope that'll turn you from a nerd into a jock. You'll be like, that's it, I'm done with science. Because these are pretty daunting. And so assuming you've got it set up, the first thing you need to do is balance it. And so the way you do that is you need to release the axis here so that you gotta move the slow motion controls come off. And you need to put this counterweight so that the telescope stays where you put it. So that's sort of step one, is you gotta balance it that way. You gotta balance it this way. Okay, and so the way to balance it this way, instead of moving the counterweight, you actually move the telescope up and down in the tube. Like this, goes forward, goes back, and then you can tighten it up there. And then the second thing you need to do when you set this up again is you need to align the finder scope. And I absolutely, like, this finder scope is terrible. You're not going to see basically anything but the moon. Even a planet looks like a star in it. And so you might want to replace this with a red dot finder if you happen to have one. But anyway, you get the finder and the telescope pointed up at the right spot. Again, you can do that during the day. That you have to do with any telescope. But what you need to do with an equatorially mounted telescope is polar alignment, which means that this axis of the telescope needs to be pointed directly at the North Celestial Pole, which is basically at the North Star. So the way you do that, at least step one for me, is you put your latitude. So I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're at about 45 degrees north latitude. So there's a dial on the side, and you dial in your latitude. That's step one. Step two is you get the telescope pointed north as you can make it. And so I'll usually open the compass app on my phone and get the telescope pointed north. So that's step two. And now you need to really zero in on that pole. So you hopefully when you look in the finder scope, if you've done those two previous steps, you'll see the North Star in the finder scope. And then you can move the mount left and right by turning the giant knob at the bottom. You can sort of fine adjust the telescope left and right, and you can fine adjust the altitude knobs to get the North Star centered in the eyepiece. And then for an added, level of accuracy, you can center the North Star in the eyepiece as well. Now, the North Star is not exactly at the North Celestial Pole, so this is not good enough for astrophotography, for example, but for just visual observing, that's basically the setup. And now that you've done that, that the telescope is pointed exactly at the North Star, you have to know how to find the North Star, just to make sure as well. But anyway, then to find your target, what you do is you loosen these locks on the right ascension and declination axis, which I guess should also define. So right ascension moves the telescope around the North Star, the North Celestial Pole, and declination moves the telescope toward and away from the North Celestial Pole. So you can't just move it like a Dobsonian. You just point at your target. There's no restriction to it. It's effortless. But this telescope, if you want to move it like over there, you sort of got to move it one axis, another axis, one axis. Like it doesn't go this way. So you sort of have to think about it. And then also, if you're over here in the sky, over here in the east, and you want to go see something in the west, you can't just go west like that. You got to go back to the home position and then move it over here. There's water. There's water.
So for beginner, we're looking at an all task then for sure. To start off.
For beginner, yeah. I mean, it's possible to just set this up and point it at stuff, but then you're missing the point of the telescope. So after you found your target, let's say the moon's over here in the west, then you're going to lock, or you found the target, roughly, maybe you get it in the eyepiece. The first thing you're going to do is lock the two axes, and then you're going to plug your slow motion controls back in wherever they're comfortable. Remember, you can switch sides with these. You're going to center your target in the eyepiece or in the finder. Then you're going to move the eyepiece. You're going to center the target in the eyepiece. And then to keep the target centered, you just need to move this right ascension knob. Switch sides here. And so then you just, hypothetically, if it's polar aligned well, you can keep the target centered the entire night just by turning this knob slowly, once every 30 seconds, about a quarter turn. And that will keep, whether it's the moon or whatever you're looking at, centered.
That's
and
so cool.
I really enjoyed this telescope for doing the Explore the Moon certificate, because I wanted to use sort of a low budget telescope, but I didn't want to have to mess around with it. And so by just turning this knob every 2 seconds, I could keep the moon centered the entire night. And so that's the reason you would pick up one of these. But again, the learning curve, loosen, lock, is there's a lot to get used to. Yeah.
Right. For the Explore the Moon, you can use a go-to, but for Explore the Universe, you cannot, right?
I believe that's correct, because all the go-to is going to do is just do that for you. So it's
what about the Messier? What about the Messier certificate? Can you use a go-to?
You can, but it's a different class of certificate. I feel like there's a box that you check, and it's the go-to version, and then I'm not sure if you get your PIN for that. But there is a certificate you can get, and it'll say go-to on the certificate. Yeah.
Oh, cool. There's a couple of questions here that I'd like to make sure I cover off too. Neighbor has a Galileo telescope he said he would give me. Can you explain the goods and bads?
Well, Galileo scopes work. They basically are like a .22 rifle from World War, I. They don't have a sight. You just line up two sort of pieces of plastic on it. So Galileo scopes, they made millions of them. I forget who made them, but they were given away for free during the International Year of Astronomy. And so I have a bunch of them in my basement here. Just that I'd been giving them, and I've been slowly giving them out. But a lot of the goal of the Galileo scope is to learn how the telescope works. So you assemble, the primary lens, and you assemble the eyepiece, and then you slide the focuser up and down until you get the image. And they have a fairly long focal. They're probably like f13, which is the ratio of the length to the aperture. And so you could use them to see the moon and the planets. You probably see the rings of Saturn. The challenge with them is they don't come with a tripod, and so even if you put them on a camera tripod, they're going to be pretty bouncy. And I don't think they have a Vixen dovetail. So Vixen is this style here that almost every telescope has. They've got this little metal thing, and no matter what brand of telescope, it should have this. And I'm not sure if the Galileo scope has it. So you would need to just grab a camera tripod and put the Galileo scope on that and just sort of do your best.
Well, we're very having fun. Time flies for sure. And I'll ask the final question for tonight, and a great way to end the show. What exciting celestial events can you see in 2022?
2022. I should have done more research for this. Chris could probably answer this better than I could. Yeah, so I usually just go to that, I think it's starmaps.com or something, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? What conjunctions do we have here?
Sky News magazine.
Or Sky News, yeah.
So one cool thing to watch for is Mars, because Mars is going to make its journey from the pre-dawn to opposition. It's going to pass all kinds of Messier objects and other planets as it goes. All through the year, you've got Mars conjunctions with cool things.
Very nice.
Yeah, there's always, so some of the stuff I'll be looking forward to. There's a comet that's getting brighter right now, and so we'll hopefully be able to see that soon. Love observing comets. Just getting out there, observing the moon. I actually don't have my Messier certificate yet, so that's on my goal list for 2022. The eclipse is until 2024, the one that comes in Eastern Canada, so that's something to look forward to in a couple of years. And yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you, John and Chris. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. I see 2 lunar eclipses coming too. Thank you for that on the chat. Randy,
the second one?
Back to you.
There's one in May. When's the second one?
Yeah,
it's at the end of the year. It's at the end of the year. Yeah, November, December. Just a second, I'll tell you.
Yeah, space launches is what.
Hopefully it's really at 9 in the evening and not 4 in the morning.
No, the May one is evening in the Eastern Canada, and the late year one is in the pre-dawn in the Western Canada.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we never get 2 in a row. 3.
Yeah, for space. Someone's asking about space launches. I'm looking forward to JWST, James Webb Space Telescope, and I'm looking forward to seeing its Starship.
Starship launch. Yeah, and Haley reminds us that the DART that was just launched is going to deflect a small asteroid in September, and that's going to be interesting to see if we finally get some, the dinosaurs are finally supported here with an asteroid deflection. So there's always so much going on, space exploration and stuff going on in the skies. And Chris, we appreciate what you and Jenna do for us online with the RASC and all the other centers, all the activities that are going on, Sky News Magazine. And man, there's just so much going on. So we appreciate it. And thank you very much for this great presentation tonight and allowing us into your inner sanctum there, your Superman telescope.
Well, my wife will want all of these telescopes back to the garage tonight. So I have to go back out into the rain and get them all out of sight, out of mind. Yeah.
I was I didn't want to bring that up, but that's thank you to your wife, and but it's great to get the feeling for, there's There's always new people who are introduced to the hobby, especially during the pandemic. You know, we've seen so many articles about people getting into amateur astronomy during the pandemic as a way to, you know, sort of do something while you're shut in. So we appreciate you and everyone who promotes this. So we really, really thank you for taking the time to share this with us.
Absolutely, Randy. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, the best way is just to go on Learn to Stargaze, go on any video. I respond to all the comments. Learn to Stargaze on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you have any recommendations for videos you want to see, I'll probably make one. You know, that's why I have so many telescopes. Is just I'm curious about them, and I'll buy them, and then I'll test them on YouTube and just share what I learned with you guys. So, and if it's Christmas and you have people on your wish list, definitely pick up, you know, one of these books. I'm sure they would really love it. And be sure to leave a review on Amazon.
That's great. You know, there's so many grade 6, grade 9 teachers who are looking for references to do their work. And I'm just watching the chat, and there's a lot of comments about the potentially bright comet that's coming up the next couple of weeks. So everyone just definitely keep on the internet and see when we can see this potentially bright comet. Just a quick question to Haley and Chris: is this a pre-dawn comet, or is this? I haven't really been up to date on this, so hopefully that information will come in.
It's rising about midnight now.
Midnight now, okay. And
but pre-dawn by about. It's near Arcturus. It's sort of passing Arcturus over the next couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, so does it get some altitude?
It's altitude now, and by the time you get to around December 3rd, you've got a moonless period. It's nice and high around 4 a.m. Okay. If you wait until it gets brightest, then it'll be right in the sunrise glow. So don't wait. Get out in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th.
Is it naked eye now, or is it binocular?
Not quite. It's I think magnitude 7-ish.
It's not quite a neo-wise yet.
No.
But you never know. These comets can do weird things, right? So you have
fingers
to
crossed.
Keep looking, right? Thanks a lot, Chris, for your help tonight, and John and everybody. I think this has been great. You know, it's always nice to just get back to basics and look at a lot of the various things that we all, as you know, when we started in this hobby, had to look through. And there's so many different telescopes and accessories available to these days. So we have to keep reiterating and reinforcing the fact that this is what's available. So great ideas for Christmas. Hopefully a lot of these telescopes aren't sitting in boats off the West Coast. But anyway, I want to thank John. I want to thank Chris and Swapna and everyone who attended tonight. We had a great list of about 50 people participating, which is super. So just a quick reminder, we're going to, Mississauga Center has its next meeting on December 10th, a potpourri meeting. But otherwise, it's so great to link people from coast to coast on these meetings. And I want to thank everyone for participating. And we'll hope to see you soon. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.